This is the WholeHog Sports Football Podcast, presented by Massage Envy, featuring interviews, analysis, and feature stories on Arkansas football. Now, from Fayetteville, here's your host, Seth Campbell.
The Razorbacks started the 2019 season 1-0. Barely.
Easton throws deep down the middle, and that is picked off. Joe Boucher.
Never will I ever apologize for winning.
But there is no time to look back, as the Razorbacks travel to Oxford this weekend to open up SEC play.
Your intensity and your intentionality is up a little bit because it is an SEC game.
Morris will take his young Hogs on the road for their first game in front of a hostile environment.
The atmosphere, that's what I really want to see. I can't wait to really see what the SEC talking about.
The Hogs will definitely see, as both teams know this may be their best shot at winning an SEC game this year. From WholeHog Sports, I'm Seth Campbell, and this is the WholeHog Football Podcast. On today's show, we'll take a deep dive into the rivalry of Arkansas and Ole Miss. We'll also get insight on the Ole Miss team from Rebels beat writer Parrish Alford. Then, we'll wrap it up with the most experienced Razorback roundtable out there, as Bob Holt, Matt Jones, and Scottie Bordelon discuss the Hogs' opening SEC play in Oxford. But first, a word from our sponsor, Massage Envy. Massage Envy, voted the top day spa in all of Northwest Arkansas, now is even better with the addition of Jan Marini and Obagi skincare services and products. These exciting new lines are provided, as well as a serum-infused microdermabrasion and chemical peels. Our face is one of the most important features that we have. Proper skincare services and products will enhance and protect your face, while the benefits, well, they could extend a lifetime. No matter your gender, come by either clinic in Rogers or Fayetteville today for your introductory session. Now, let's get to the rivalry. It doesn't take long to spot some hostility between the Razorbacks and the Rebels. Just look at the series record. If you happen to look at the Ole Miss record books, then you'll find their record to be 27-31-1. But if you venture to the Razorbacks' official records, then you'll see a discrepancy. 32 wins, 26 losses, and 1 tie. 1 extra win for the Hogs. So, what's the deal? It all stems from a game in Little Rock in 1914. The Razorbacks claim the Rebels used an ineligible player named Joe Evans in a game the Rebels won 13-7. But upon further review, the ineligible player isn't even the story of that game. When searching through old newspapers, I found a clipping from the game posted in the Arkansas Democrat. E.T. Pickering, the head coach of the Razorbacks, found himself in a tussle with a photographer. It was a one-sided brouhaha by the reports. Pickering had been herding photographers away from the sideline all day when A.W. Park of the Park Harper News Service arrived at the game to take a picture. Remind you, back in 1914, it was no small task to take a picture. Pickering gave Parker a shove and then brought his $200 camera down on the ground with what the newspaper called a, quote, resounding whack. While there isn't much more information about the fight, the newspaper article ends with 3 short sentences. Quote, Pickering was staggered. The fight was stopped. Park got a smash in the face. Well, speaking of brawls, the Ole Miss and Arkansas rivalry isn't short of one of those either. According to an account in the Hope Star, Ole Miss's Bill Schneller returned an interception 54 yards for a touchdown and ran the final 30 yards thumbing his nose at the Arkansas players. To add insult to injury, Schneller then thumbed his nose at the Arkansas fans when he crossed the goal line. For those of us not in the know on 1930s insults, to thumb one's nose means to place your thumb on your nose and extend and wiggle your other fingers. Apparently, it was quite the insult in 1938. According to former Ole Miss assistant coach and athletic director Tad Smith, when the gun sounded and the end of the game happened, the fans poured out onto the field to fight. It was wild. People were fighting everywhere. Regardless of the outcome on Saturday, it's highly unlikely that any fans will touch the field after the contest. But with the last 4 games between these two teams decided by 4 points or fewer, there won't be any love lost between the Rebels and the Razorbacks.
Massage Envy with clinics in Rogers and Fayetteville has been awarded Northwest Arkansas's Best Day Spa and Best Massage. One of the reasons is our care for athletes, both serious and recreational. We now offer rapid tension relief sessions using a high-caliber vibrating tool and total body stretch sessions like the ones used by the PGA. Both of these new services can be combined with the always popular deep muscle treatment. So whether you compete or just want to relax, there is no place better than Massage Envy.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
I've been going to games for as long as I can remember. We had season tickets since my dad stopped playing there.
That was Mississippi product Grayson Gunner on growing up going to Ole Miss football games with his dad, a former player for the Rebels. Welcome into the Whole Hog Football Podcast. Seth Campbell joined alongside now Parrish Alford, and Parrish is an Ole Miss beat reporter for the Daily Journal in Tupelo. And, well, Parrish, you cover the Ole Miss Rebels, and they had a rough go of it in Memphis the other day, didn't they?
They did have a rough go of it. It was kind of a split decision. You know, the big off-season story for Ole Miss has been these two new coordinators, both experienced head coaches, both former Pac-12 coaches of the year, in Rich Rodriguez when he was at Arizona and Mike McIntyre when he was at Colorado. Well, the defense under McIntyre played really well. People who have seen Ole Miss a little bit the last few years know what a struggle that side of the ball has been for them, and they really looked much improved defensively. They did not look improved offensively. You know, we knew they were going to look different. We knew they were going to try to emphasize the run, but they really couldn't establish the run. And, you know, they had -1 rushing yard at halftime. They went to a few more power sets in the second half, and they did better, had about 80 yards rushing in the second half. So it was a little better in the second half, but they didn't get on the board until the 3:11 mark of the third. Really a slow start, and at the end of the day, just not enough points.
Yeah, let's start there with the points. Ole Miss scored all of their points against Memphis in the second half. What did you see from the Rebels that they did different in that second half?
Well, they ran two tight end sets a little more, and they just kind of got to a little more power running style there, and that was effective for them. And in the second half, Scottie Phillips looks like the back that we saw last year before his ankle injury in November, and you know, ran over a safety. Showed some nice cuts, and had a couple of decent runs there in the second half. You know, that was really it. Mostly the two tight end sets. I would expect that we'll see more of that if they can't get off to a good start against Arkansas, something that we didn't see in the first half. We've been hearing all off season that, you know, this offense was going to use a lot of pre-snap movement, a lot of motion to try and draw defense out of position a little bit and help in the run game. We saw almost none of that in the first half. Matt Luke told us later it was because they were falling behind the chains, and he felt like you had to be ahead of the chains a little bit to do that, to have success with it. They did a little bit of that in the second half, but, you know, from start to finish, didn't see very much at all in the regard of motion and that kind of pre-snap movement that we know Rich Rodriguez has done in the past.
Sticking with that two tight end set and that kind of concept, do you think that is something that they will use going forward?
I do. I think given the state of offensive line play at Ole Miss right now, which is inexperienced and not much depth, I think they're going to have to do some things like that to be successful. We'll see. I know they were not successful when they didn't do it. So, you know, how big a jump can they make in a week? I think you'll see some of those sets.
Right. They do say the biggest jump is from game 1 to game 2. All right, well, let's talk about the redshirt freshman quarterback Matt Corral. He was sacked 3 times, and he finished 9 for 19 in the passing game against Memphis. What do you want to see Corral improve on in his first SEC game against Arkansas this year?
Corral just needs to improve in his accuracy, and it's hard to get a good read on him right now because, the blocking in front of him was atrocious. I know that it was his first start. I know there were some jitters there as well. It was really a bad first half for Matt Corral. He was 5 for 13, and there were times that he just missed guys and missed them badly when he had passing lanes available. Now, when they got a little momentum going in the second half, he was 4 for 6, and he looked better. I mean, the whole offense looked better in the second half, but, for Corral, you hope that was nerves. You hope that it was jitters and that he got those worked out. But I think the accuracy for him is something to keep an eye on.
Well, flipping over to the other side of the ball, Rakeem Boyd, he rushed for over 100 yards in one quarter last year against Ole Miss. But the Ole Miss defense will look different this year because they're moving to that 3-4. How do you expect the Rebels to deal with Boyd this year?
Well, I just expect them to have more success against him this year and against all running backs, not just Boyd. Look, the big thing for Ole Miss in the run defense the last couple of years has been players being out of position, assignment bust. There were just fewer of those against Memphis. You had guys lined up correctly most often. They weren't perfect in their assignments, but they were much, much better than we've seen them in the past. I've watched this run defense at Ole Miss for several years, and lots of times I could see a guy set the edge and take on a blocker and do the right thing there and turn the play back inside. Well, there was no help. There was nobody there.
Right.
And that's where a lot of those big runs came from. I think we're going to see less of that from the Ole Miss defense this year. We certainly saw less of it in the first game. So I would think they'll have a good game plan for Rakeem Boyd, probably have a little more success against him. Now, Patrick Taylor from Memphis rushed for about 120-some-odd yards, maybe a little bit more, something like that. But the fact of the matter is Ole Miss was on the field a lot because their offense couldn't sustain drives. Last year sometimes they were getting off the field or the defense spent a lot of time on the field because the offense would score in a hurry. Well, that wasn't the case. But, the offense was not on the field for other reasons. And when that fourth quarter came around, clearly the Rebels were winded and they weren't tackling as well. And Memphis was able to take possession with 6:21 left and just run out the clock.
Yeah, they were able to it seemed to put the game in control and just overpower the Rebels at the line of scrimmage at times. Well, the last SEC win for both of these teams was against the other. Arkansas beat Ole Miss in Oxford in 2017, and then in 2018, the Rebels returned the favor in Little Rock and beat the Hogs. So from an Arkansas perspective, this game is pretty big in, setting up the rest of the Chad Morris era and what it might look like down the road. What about on the other side for Matt Luke? What is this game and how big is it for his job security at Ole Miss?
Well, I think it's equally big. I don't think that there is a security issue for Matt Luke right now, but there's a security issue for any coach if the season just goes off the rails completely and it's, you just can't regain control. I think what Ole Miss needs to do, what Matt Luke needs to do this season is, they would love to win 6 and get to a bowl game. Look, they've just now gotten back up to their 85 scholarships. Now, that doesn't mean that they have the depth and the talent that they need on all of those scholarships, but, at least they're back there, finally working their way back from sanctions. I think a good season for Ole Miss would be if they could get to 6 wins, get to a bowl game. They're finally bowl eligible again after 2 years of not being eligible. Would there be pressure on Matt Corral at the end of the year? If there was, I would think that, if there were only 2 or 3 wins at that point, if the team had just looked really bad and had not competed, I think if this is a 5-win team when it's all over, but it's a 5-win team that was very competitive.
Right.
I think people would support a continued rebuild.
Very good. Talking to Parrish Alford from the Daily Journal in Tupelo. Before I let you go here, Parrish, I got one more question for you. These two teams, they've had some crazy finishes over the past few years. And we know that, nothing is going to replace the Egg Bowl in Mississippi. We get that. But from the Ole Miss perspective, is this game between Arkansas and Ole Miss developing into a rivalry?
I think so. I mean, look, these teams have played since 1908.
Right.
And there have been some bizarre moments in the series going back to that disputed game in 1914 when both teams wanted to claim the win. There has been a lot of bizarre in this series in the modern era, and the bizarre has tended to favor Arkansas. The 4th and 25, Ole Miss, you get a stop there. In 2015, you go to Atlanta.
Right.
The only team in the West that hasn't been there, not counting Texas A&M. And it's crazy, just stuff like that. But there have been other things. The fumble in 2017, Jordan Tiamo just inexplainably just losing it there on the handoff, and Ole Miss, having been up 31-7 in the game, ends up losing. There have just been moments like that, and I think that adds to the rivalry a little bit, and just the fact that there hasn't been that much distance between the teams. I mean, I think they've been, fairly evenly matched in these games. And you look at the last 4 games, the average margin of victory is 2.5 points. So there's just not that much distance between these teams. They're across the border from one another. They've played since the early 1900s, played a lot when they weren't SEC rivals. So I think it is developing a little bit.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Parrish. That's Parrish Alford from the Daily Journal in Tupelo. Make sure to check him out online. And thanks so much for joining us, Parrish.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Massage Envy has been voted the best day spa and best massage in all of Northwest Arkansas. One reason is our great therapists and estheticians. Due to increased demand with our new services in both massage and skincare, Massage Envy is now looking for talented, licensed providers to join our great team. A competitive compensation package and family-like environment are just some of the reasons our providers have worked nearly 10 years with Massage Envy. Looking for a great career? Come by our clinics in Rogers or Fayetteville and apply today. Want more coverage of your home team? Download the WholeHog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for WholeHog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The WholeHog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today.
Welcome into the WholeHog Sports Football Podcast. I am Seth Campbell, bringing you one of the most experienced roundtables here in Northwest Arkansas. And Scottie, Bordelon, Matt Jones, and Bob Holt going to get you ready for Arkansas versus Ole Miss. All right, guys. Game 1 is in the books. SEC play starts this weekend for the Hogs as they travel to Oxford to take on the Rebels. Chad Morris said on his press conference this week that the offense was vanilla by design. Matt, we'll start with you. Do you expect a more intricate offensive game plan from Morris and Craddock this week?
Let me just say that the experience comes from Bob, who has more years than the rest of us combined on the
Exactly.
Razorback beat. I think it'll probably be more – I think you'll see more wrinkles to it. What I'm interested, though, Seth, is that if they couldn't run their base offense any better than they did against a team like Portland State, then how do you expect them to run more complex schemes against better competition? I think that there's some real concern about the offense coming out of that game against Portland State the other day. It just didn't look very good. And we're 13 games into the Chad Morris era now at Arkansas, and I still don't think we've seen an offense quite like the offense that we saw from him at Clemson or the offense that we saw at SMU or the type of offense that he's promised to see at Arkansas. And I don't know, why that is. Last year I thought it might be because of the quarterback play, that the quarterbacks weren't able to run the offense at the pace that they wanted them to. Well, they've got the quarterbacks in now that are used to running this type of offense, and it still didn't look that great against Portland State. They can get them, they can improve, they can get better. But I think through one game, there's got to be some concerns about that offense.
What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you really thought they'd dominate Portland State, and they didn't come close to doing that. Now, there were some drop passes. There were some missed passes. I'm sure there were some missed blocks. And they had almost 400 yards in total offense, which is pretty good, but really against an FCS team, you think they'd have more than that. So, and Ole Miss did pretty well defensively against Memphis. They held them to 15 points, and 2 of those came on a safety. So really the defense of Ole Miss only gave them 13 points to a pretty good AAC team. My feeling is Memphis would probably be middle of the pack SEC team. So you feel like Ole Miss lost, but they faced a much stronger opponent.
Yeah, they showed that they'd probably be middle of the pack by beating a team that's probably going to be at the bottom of the pack in the SEC and Ole Miss. Scottie, what about you? Do you expect more intricate offense from Morris and Craddock?
You would hope so. You absolutely hope so. Like what Matt said, they tried to run their base stuff as best they could on Saturday, and it still didn't look great. You wonder what kind of changes will come with the offense. Getting a guy like C.J. O'Grady back, who I think is arguably might be your top playmaker, like outside of Rakeem Boyd, and he's proven himself. I went back and watched the game this morning for some reason, and it still didn't look good. I expect a little bit of improvement going into week 2. I like the way that they ran the ball, especially the way Rakeem ran it. I think he ran for a career high 114 yards, but outside of that, the passing game was spotty. The quarterbacks completed less than 50% of their passes. They didn't get in the end zone. And one thing Ben Hicks talked about on Saturday, and Chad and Joe Craddock mentioned it on Monday. They moved the ball pretty well, but once they got into scoring position, got down into the red zone, they didn't punch it in with touchdowns. That's a big problem.
Talking about C.J. O'Grady, how big is it, Bob, that the Razorbacks are going to get him back on offense this upcoming week?
I think it's huge because, like Scottie said, he might be their best playmaker. He's their leading return receiver. 30 catches last year, and he missed the first 2 games. And also Chase Harrell, who got moved from receiver to tight end, based on what the coaches said, he blocked pretty well. He had 3 drops. I think he had 1 catch, but he had 3 drops. I think 2 of them would have gone for first downs on third down, I think. So no offense to Chase, but I think they're going to be throwing the ball to O'Grady a whole lot more, and Grayson Gunner too. So it'll be real big for them to get O'Grady back.
Oh yeah, same thing. Like just getting him back, that adds another proven playmaker to the roster. And I think Grayson Gunner did okay as far as his route running, and he got targeted in the end zone. I think that's the ball that Ben Hicks threw to him in the end zone. I think that's a play that he's got to go up and make. And then Craddock, he said that I think Gunner caught a ball like on the 9-yard line and couldn't quite get into the end zone. And so Gunner's got to take it to the next level. He's got to go to that next level that O'Grady's at. That's probably asking a lot out of Gunner because O'Grady is such a special talent. But I have no doubt that if O'Grady's, if he's fully into it, he's got his head on straight, he can make an impact.
He had a good game against Ole Miss last year. I think he had 2 touchdowns in that game down in Little Rock. He gives them some good hands. That was something they struggled with on Saturday. They dropped some passes. Think about Chase Harrell. He probably dropped 2 or 3 at the tight end position. And so, that gives them a more reliable threat at tight end. And, if you get a more reliable threat at tight end, that starts to take some pressure off the receivers, and maybe you can do some things, at the outside of the field. And so I think it's big to have a better player at that position. And he's the best player they have at tight end. There's no doubt about that.
Well, speaking of Rakeem Boyd, as we said earlier, Rakeem, he rushed for 109 yards in the first quarter of last year's game between the Hogs and the Rebels before he went out with an injury. Do you think Boyd will break out again this year, Scottie?
Definitely think he's got a chance. What did Memphis' running back run for 100+ last week? So, if Arkansas's offensive line gets good push, I don't see why he couldn't have another career day. He said after the game on Saturdays, Rakeem, he said, he's looking at this game as kind of a little bit of redemption for him because he was on pace to have a really big day, and he goes down with a tailbone injury. I think he's definitely got this one circled on his calendar, and I think he's in for a big day. If Arkansas's offensive line can hold his own.
I think back in June, I talked to Rakeem about the Ole Miss game, and I asked him, what do you think you could have done had you not been injured? He said, I think I could have gone for about 300. And, he really meant it too. Now, this is a different Ole Miss defense, with Mike McIntyre, so they're not playing they've got 8 starters back from last year. They weren't a good defense last year. In fact, I think they were probably one of the 10 worst in the country. I know they were the worst in the SEC, at least statistically. It'll all come down to Arkansas's offensive line. That was kind of a hit or miss, the way they did the other day. They ran okay against Portland State. Like Scottie said, Boyd had a career high in rushing. But this is a lot different type of defensive unit than they saw against Portland State in terms, not necessarily of scheme. Yeah, the scheme is different, but athletes. I mean, Ole Miss has got some really experienced players like Benito Jones in the middle, who's a really good nose tackle for them. Or Ryder Anderson, one of their defensive ends. They go senior across the front 3 in their 3-4 defense. And so this will be a bigger challenge for Arkansas's offensive line by a long shot over what they saw in the first game.
What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, I agree. He needs some help from the offensive line, but I do think Boyd's the kind of guy that compared to the other backs, he can maybe read a hole better, gets more yards after contact. I guess if he had 109 yards, I think he had 7 carries. So what does that figure out to like?
It's about 15 yards a carry.
Yeah, I don't necessarily expect him to average 15 yards a carry, but if they can give him the ball, say 20, 25 times, I could see him going, 150 yards or something. And they're going to need a big game from him, I think, to help with the passing game. And Boyd is as good as he was last year. And he was very good. He's a lot better this year because he just got into camp, or he just got in here last year when camp starts, and he was playing with a bad shoulder all year too, which we didn't realize at the time. So, I think he can have a big game with some help from the offensive line. They don't need to be the Green Bay Packers. They just need to give him some space.
All right, gentlemen, we made it 3 questions in, but we got to ask. You can't have a roundtable without the quarterback question. Ben Hicks, he took a majority of the snaps against Portland State, but Craddock did say that he thinks Starkel will play against Ole Miss. What does this back and forth of the quarterback situation tell you, Matt?
It just tells me that neither of them have won the job yet permanently. I mean, we saw this early last year when they went Ty Storey in the opener, and then Cole Kelly came in and played better, or maybe it's the other way around. I think Ty Storey played better than Kelly in the opener, and then Kelly played better in the second. And it was really about the 3rd or 4th, 5th game of the year before Ty Storey kind of set himself apart as the better of the 2 quarterbacks. And I think that's probably going to be the case again, this year with these 2 quarterbacks. Maybe it doesn't take that long, but we're obviously going to be multiple games into the year before a starter wins the job. And I thought it was interesting listening to Joe Craddock talk about Hicks' first game. He said if you take away the drop passes and the throws where he had to throw the ball away, he probably completed about 2 out of every 3 passes, which is a really good number, what you want to see from your quarterback. But there are some other problems going on there, that contribute, and you can't take those plays away. Those plays still count. Those 9 plays still count. And so it'll be interesting to see how they play against Ole Miss this week. I think that this will be a really good gauge of who the better quarterback is, kind of like the Auburn game was last year, but the Auburn game, it was game 4 of the season before they played that. Okay, so they finally get to play an SEC team in game 2 this year, and that'll help with, trying to figure out who your quarterback is going forward.
What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, I mean, I expect both guys to play just like they did against Portland State. It was interesting because I'm not real good at math, but I think Hicks took 70 snaps and Starkel took 7. So really not a real even breakdown. I think the fans are ready to see Starkel when the offense failed and Starkel went in there and immediately threw a pick, or maybe on his 3rd attempt, and everybody's groaning about that. So I'd like to see Starkel get a few more chances, but on the other hand, if it's a close game, swapping your quarterbacks in and out is not a good thing. So they need to get this figured out. But by the same token, if they're not sure, they don't need to say, well, we're going to start this guy and be stubborn about it. They just need to keep letting this play out, I guess. But But I think it needs to be figured out here definitely by the A&M game.
In Starkel's defense, if I could say, first off, on the interception, that was a bad pass. That was probably the worst pass of the game. There were 3 defenders between Nick Starkel and the intended receiver there in the red zone. That was a bad pass. But to his credit, he came back the next drive, threw a 38-yard pass on the first play of the next drive, got them into the red zone, and the problem with that drive was not the quarterback play. It was what was going on at the sideline, the miscommunication between whether or not they're going to run another play or they're going to spike the ball. And so the second drive is remembered for him not getting it punched into the end zone, but I don't know that was really Nick Starkel's fault. I thought that on the second drive he looked pretty darn good.
Yeah, he gave Trey Knox his only completion of the day.
Yeah, I think Starkel's got to have more wherewithal, though. Like, know this game situation.
Yeah.
You're under 15 seconds and you're at the 25, maybe inside the 20-yard line.
I think they were at 19.
Yeah, so you're inside the 20-yard line and you see time's running out. You got to get the ball. You got to kill it. You got to kill the clock. Maybe get 2, maybe 3 more plays out of it. They only got 2. Neither one of them stopped the clock before halftime. But as far as the Ole Miss game, I think Ben's obviously going to start. I will be curious to see though if Arkansas gets down 7-0, 14-0. And there's like first sign of trouble, do the coaches, we need a spark and we got to go to Nick just to kind of change things up and give us a spark. We'll see, but I expect to see some progress out of Ben. And I think obviously adding a weapon like O'Grady will make him settle in a little bit more, give him a safety valve.
Yeah, that tight end is normally used as a safety valve, especially for a quarterback that is new. And although Hicks has been in the system, he hasn't necessarily played against SEC competition yet, so we'll have to see how that goes. Bob, we'll move on to you. What would you like to see Hicks improve on in Week 2 over Week 1?
Well, obviously, completion percentage. And there were some drops, which he can't do anything about, but I think he could have given some guys some more catchable passes. And I also think there were some times where, and it's easy sitting up in the press box, you don't have some guy bearing down on you, but you'd see a guy, breaking open, and he didn't see him. At least I assume he didn't see him because he didn't throw the ball to him. So you'd like there to be some more awareness. But like I said, that's easy to say when you're watching the game and not back there, having guys chasing you around.
What about you, Scottie?
Yeah, so I did go back and watch the game from Saturday this morning for a reason. I charted the quarterbacks, and I had Ben Hicks with 3 interceptable throws, which are balls that aren't picked off, but definitely could have been. There were 3 of those, and then I counted 3 inaccurate passes. 2 of those interceptable balls actually went for catches. One was Mike Woods, that 15-yard catch on the Portland State sideline that he really bailed Hicks out on, and then Tyson Morris made I don't know if it was actually a catch or not, but they gave him credit for like a 16-yard catch on the Portland State sideline too. He's just got to be careful with the ball. Like Ole Miss DBs would have picked those balls off probably, and especially the ball to Woods. That ball just floated. Like it felt like it was in the air forever, and a more aware, athletic, better defensive back probably would have picked that ball off or knocked it away. I just think his decision-making's got to be better. He's got to be more crisp. I think he's just got to show some fire. Like, didn't really see a whole lot of that on Saturday.
Yeah, on that pass to Woods, a safety from Alabama or Auburn or LSU, they would have not only picked it off, but probably taken it about 10 to 15 yards up the sideline. He's got to get a lot better on his passes, a lot more crisp. And like Bob said, there were some passes that just weren't on the money to receivers. They had a chance, and they're probably counted as drops, but, the ball's 6 inches behind them, and they're having to turn around. It hits their hand, and it goes off. And so he's got to be a lot more precise with his passes. I'd like to see whoever the offense is get this offense, or whoever the quarterback is, get this offense rolling. Get some tempo to it. Like I said earlier, when we were talking, we just haven't seen that tempo, that pace that Chad Morris talked about. The what do you say? Full tilt boogie, hammer down offense. We haven't seen that in 13 games.
Right.
They got to get a quarterback in there who's able to get this offense going, because this offense is all based around tempo. And if you've got this offense that's not got the tempo component to it, I think it makes it really easy for the opposing defenses to stop them.
And when Arkansas typically plays a team that goes up tempo, those teams seems like they never have an issue going fast, playing fast. Arkansas, just like you said, Arkansas hasn't been able to do that itself on offense yet.
I'll pose this question to you then, Matt. Do you think that the tempo problem could come from them not having a quarterback that is mobile and can utilize more of Morris's offense?
I don't know about that. I mean, I think Hicks is mobile enough. he's not the most fleet-footed quarterback that there is, but he showed Saturday the ability to get outside the pocket, and I almost think that his mobility was a little bit to his detriment on Saturday. That there were some times that he could have stood in there, maybe held onto the ball for another half second or second, and made a better throw, and that he kind of got happy feet and got outside the pocket too fast. So I don't know if that's necessarily the problem. I think that you got to be able to complete passes to have the tempo in this offense, because if you're throwing incompletions and that just slows the whole game down, you got to be able to keep moving the ball forward, and we haven't seen enough of that from the Morris Craddock offense.
All right, let's flip on over to the other side of the ball, the defensive line. Well, they lost a key player when Dorian Gerald went down. Who do you think is going to step up for the defensive line and replace the senior Bob?
Well, Jamario Bell's the obvious guy. I think he's slated to start as long as he's healthy. He's a senior. He doesn't have a ton of playing experience there because he's played 18 different positions since he's been here. But I think it's his second straight year at end. He's obviously got a lot of physical ability. He's tall and rangy, and I think he has pretty good quickness. So he's a logical guy, and they're going to have to depend on a bunch of true freshmen too.
What do you think, Scottie?
Yeah, I think Jamario's the guy, and I think it's a big spot for him. It's a really big spot for him. I think this will be his first career start at defensive end. It's really unfortunate that Dorian Gerald went down with his neck injury, his strained artery in his neck. It was really unfortunate because it looked like he was playing pretty well on Saturday. I know he got a couple of pressures on Davis Alexander, took him to the ground at least once, and I think it's Jamario's turn. And Jamario is a guy kind of like Gabe Richardson, who you look at and it's like, man, he's got all the physical tools. He's a freak athletically, probably in the weight room, same way. Great size, great athleticism, but he just hasn't put it together on the field yet. This is a big opportunity for him to kind of go prove himself and maybe stay in that spot. But like Bob said, they're going to be counting on, on the other end, probably Mateo Soli, Colin Clay, Zach Williams, guys like that.
Yeah, I would say Soli is the one that I'm most interested to see because of how well he played in the spring. You got to go through the spring practice, be part of that, get some more experience, and they've got some of these defensive ends who have been in here for 9 months now, and it's not your typical true freshman defensive end. And so Soli, if he can play through that fracture in his hand that they said that he had, I'd be really interested to see how he plays this weekend.
All right, speaking of defense, Chavis's defense, well, they looked improved last Saturday, flying around to the ball, holding Portland State to just 230 yards. Now, granted, it was Portland State, an FCS team. But what do you want to see out of a Chavis-led defense against Ole Miss to say that they are improved over last year? We'll start with you, Scottie.
Yeah, I think Arkansas was pretty solid in run defense. And like you said, it was Portland State. They've got to contain the quarterback better. Davis Alexander he squirted away from pressure several times the other day and got downfield for 20-plus yard gains a little bit too often, probably for Chavis's liking. I remember, I think it was on the first drive, he had a 22-yard run, and just looking at the film, I think Scooter Harris was out of position on that and gave him the whole left side of the field open. So he kind of broke down on his assignment right there. You got to be assignment sound. You have to be sharp. Run defense was pretty solid. We'll see if they can continue that. I think Memphis really shut down Ole Miss's offense just all the way around. I think just in receivers just not missing assignments and letting guys get past them. I think that'll be the biggest thing.
How do they play against tempo? Because Rich Rodriguez, before Gus Malzahn was doing what he was doing at Auburn, Rich Rodriguez was doing this, at West Virginia 10 years before that. And, so he's really a great teacher of that tempo offense. And I'll be interested, I'm interested to see, did Ole Miss show everything last week against Memphis? Or were they maybe going with the same philosophy on offense that Arkansas was going with? Now, of course, they got into that situation that maybe they threw everything out after halftime, but I don't know. I thought the defense played really well against Portland State, guys. I mean, they had, I think after or before that last drive, I think Portland State had 155 yards on 45 plays. That is really, really good defense. And remember, this is a Portland State team that with a lot of these same players and the same offense, they kind of went up and down the field a little bit against Oregon last year and against Nevada. Now, they didn't result in a lot of points, but they put up some, good yardage totals. And, so how can they handle the tempo? How can they handle was probably going to be some more skilled players on the perimeter, especially at the receiver positions and even the tight end position. Octavius Cooley is a really good tight end for Ole Miss. That's what I'm interested to see this weekend.
What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, I thought the defense played pretty well. I mean, they gave that long drive at the end where they had some younger guys in there and they had some penalties, and then Bordelon State just kind of made a big play there on fourth down, that tight end. Charlie Tamapua or whatever.
Charlie T.
Charlie T. made a really nice play on fourth down. I know John Chavis, they say if they feel like if they get 3 turnovers, that they're going to win the game. They got 3 turnovers, all interceptions. And I think they had several turnovers the year before when they opened against Eastern Illinois. So it'll be interesting to see, can they get turnovers against an SEC team, 1, 2, 3, whatever it might be. I think if they can do that, they got a really good chance to win if they can get 2 or 3 turnovers as long as they take care of the ball.
And how's the defensive line play against an inexperienced Ole Miss line? That was one of the big problems with Ole Miss against Memphis the other day is I think they've got 1 starter back in the offensive line from last season. They've only got 3 starters back on offense, period. There's a lot of inexperience there. So I'll be interested to see how aggressive Chavis is against that offense.
Yeah, just like in the context of, like Seth said, the 230 yards of offense that Arkansas's defense gave up, that was, I think, 3rd best in terms of total yardage allowed in Chad Morris's career. And I think it was second best at Arkansas. I think it was only behind Auburn. And they went down to Auburn last year.
Yeah.
So it was a good place to start.
Okay. Each of the last 4 games against the Rebels, guys, have been decided by 6 points or less, with the last 2 contests in Oxford finishing as 1-point games. We can all remember the Hunter Heave and good old Connor Limpert kicking a walk-off. Can you have a walk-off kick? The Limpert kicking
There are 4 seconds left in the game.
It was close enough, Matt. How do you see?
It was a start toward your locker room kick.
How do you see this one ending in Oxford this year? We'll start with you, Matt.
I figure Ole Miss will win. I think even though Ole Miss lost its first game and Arkansas won the first game, I think the level in talent that they played in competition was starkly different. Portland State's a team, to me, if you know a lot about the FCS, you know that conference they play in is one of the better conferences in the FCS, and they're not one of the better teams in that conference. I think they're picked to finish 10th out of 13 teams in their conference in the preseason. They look to me like, at the high end, they could be like a 6-5 type team that may make the playoffs, but probably will not. Memphis has had Power 5 teams at the Liberty Bowl and beaten them 3 times in the last 5 years, twice against Ole Miss, and then the game against UCLA a few years ago. I believe they won that game there in Memphis. And so, I think that, the fact that that Ole Miss lost the first game, that they're playing at home, it's their home opener, that to me gives Ole Miss the edge in this game. Plus, I think they're a little bit more veteran team. I know they're playing under a new offense and a new defense, but I think overall they've got something like 66 lettermen back from last season. There's a lot of players who have starting experience, or at least who have playing experience on that team. And the other thing is that for the coaches, this is a hot seat game for these 2 head coaches. If you're Matt Luke and you lose this game, I don't know that he survives the season down there. And if you're Chad Morris, you're 0-8 in the SEC going into this game. You do not want to start 0-9, or they've got A&M next, 0-10, whatever it might be. You remember Brett Bielema's start to his career was 0-13 in the SEC, and he kept saying, "Well, we're getting close, we're getting close," and they really were. They were losing some close games to Alabama, to Mississippi State that year, but when you go 0-13 to start, you lose a significant portion of your fan base, and you don't get them back. And that was a big deal for Brett Bielema. So I think for Morris, to have a chance to have some longevity here at Arkansas, he's got to avoid that type of start and be able to show some progress against SEC teams. And so this is a huge game, I think, for both of these coaching staffs. And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on both of these teams to perform this weekend.
Yeah, I think the last 4 years, not only have the games been close, they've been pretty wild, high-scoring games. I think the lowest winning total has been 34 points. Arkansas beat Ole Miss here 34-30 back in, was that 2016 or something like that. So I think this one will be close, but I think it'll be low-scoring based on what the offenses did. And with Ole Miss being at home, I'd have to give them the edge, but I don't think this is going to be a 35-31 game or 42-35 game. I think it might be a 17-13 game or something like that.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Bob too. I think I picked Ole Miss by about 10, our Hogs Illustrated prediction for this week. it wouldn't surprise me to see both offenses kind of get off to a slow start, kind of reminiscent of week one, and just watch both of the teams just kind of feel each other out. And then, I think it might be whoever makes the right adjustments at halftime or going into the second half. And I kind of expect Ole Miss playing at home just to make a few plays. And like Matt said, they've got some experience on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe they come up with a turnover, maybe some points on defense or special teams. I expect Ole Miss to pull away about 7 to 10 points late.
All right, guys. Well, there it is. Thanks so much for joining us. Scottie Bordelon, Matt Jones, and Bob Holt here on the WholeHog Football Podcast Roundtable. Make sure to check out all of their stuff on WholeHogSports.com or in Hogs Illustrated. The WholeHog Sports Football Podcast is produced and edited for airship by me, Seth Campbell. Special shout-outs to Parrish Alford, Matt Jones, Bob Holt, and Scottie Bordelon. You can read more from Parrish Alford on the Daily Journal. You can read more from Scottie, Matt, and Bob on WholeHogSports.com. Thank you to our sponsor, Massage Envy. By supporting them, you are supporting us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. Subscribing and sharing is one of the best ways to let your friends know about the podcast. Theme music is by Silent Partners. I'm Seth Campbell for WholeHog Sports. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you back here next week.